All right, and then we had lecture number 4, which was the verification and validation aspects of personalized medical device by our good friend, Dr. Chumoli from the TGA. And the poor guy got absolutely hammered again by the audience. And again, it was pretty spicy. Essentially, look, I'm confused after the whole conversation. I had more clarity on certain things, but it is incredibly confusing. And some of the things that I took away is when we are making in-house customized medical devices, we're going through this phase at the moment, and like medical device can be a splint, whatever you're putting in somebody's mouth. So a model is not that, but there's so many different components that fall under that category. What happens at the moment is since 2009, we've been going through like a change and phase over. We've been going through a transition period after they made some changes to basically now people have up until the deadline of the 1st of November 2024, which is this year, not very far away, to register those medical devices that have now been included under the umbrella of what's considered a medical device. Dental technicians in the room particularly were super unhappy because it's very strange. Like they authorize and recognize dental prosthodontists, dentists, dental prosthesists. Who else? Pretty much everybody in the dental community except for dental technicians. They are not considered health professionals, even though they're manufacturing medical devices for us as dentists. They had 2 dental technicians on the different professional bodies they were interviewing, but yet they weren't considered equal to the other people on the working body that they were talking to, which I don't really understand how that works. That's kind of confusing. We get taught material properties, but we're not taught in dental school how to make physical porcelain crowns other than maybe milling them. But we're not hand layering them, we're not sintering them, we're not firing them, we're not taking them from wood start to finish. A dental technician who is a trained professional in using those materials and the science around it and making them, they aren't authorized to make a crown unless even if they're using a TGA approved material that has been, and they follow the instructions of that manufacturer, they can't do that unless they apply to the TGA to then be registered to be able to manufacture that medical device. So it's this weird kind of double standard where you're still getting the same outcome and nobody's breaking the rule. And people are conducting best practice because we're using stuff that is actually safely recognized within Australia. It's so weird. Dr. Andrew Ip put it really succinctly when everybody was getting very emotional. And he sort of just said, hey guys, you have a working group of professional bodies and different members of the profession, but none of us know who they are. And communication has been abysmal and nobody knows what's going on. And nobody can really get a straight answer. And it's super confusing. And there's just been a complete breakdown of communication. And Dr. Chumoli agreed. He was like, yeah, that has been our biggest challenge, being able to communicate it because it hasn't been getting out there. And it's hard because they are regulated. And they regulate so many different areas within the medical space. Whatever's happening, it's just not working. Dr. Chumoli's solution was, if you're finding that this isn't a good solution, then reach out to your professional bodies. As a dentist, I can reach out to the Australian Dental Association because they have a peer advisory service. And even if they don't specifically know, they can then seek out and ask the TGA or in-house legal or whoever it is to then look into it to explain it. But the dental technicians, they don't have that access to that sort of service. They're a member of the team within our profession and they're getting stamped on, and I don't really understand why. It's super weird. Enough about that. That was a solid lecture. Okay, so we've gotten past the spicy bit. Dr. Chumoli brings the heat with the TGA. And then we had lunch. Yum. And then afterwards we had Terry again talking about DIY aligners. He was saying that 3D printed resin aligners sound great in theory. You think it's going to cut down on labor, but the reality is you have to really look at what is the workflow. It tends to be very brittle and it will look great for a couple of days and then it will break. And when you're printing a 3D printed resin aligner, It tends to not be that particularly successful because they're very reactive to the solvents that you're cleaning them in because they're so thin. You have to centrifuge the excess material off whatever you've 3D printed with them. You then have to remove the supports on each individual aligner. Then you have to polish the aligner and finish the aligner. And they just break. It's one of those things. He's worked with companies who have tried to make it happen, and it's in his interest to make it happen, but it doesn't work at the moment. And hopefully we catch up on it. But the other challenging thing about that sort of resin is you can get something that's okay, but if you then find a way to improve and iterate on it, you have a lag of at least like 2 to 3 years, they were saying, to then have that new variation, that new iteration approved by TGA to then be able to go to market. So there's a lot of things that need to happen to then be able to get it out there. So watch this space, we'll see what happens. Thermoforming works well though, we know that much. And there's a lot of really great free softwares out there and also paid softwares. So for example, Blue Sky Bio is a free software that you can play around on. And the nice thing about that is you don't have to pay anything unless you actually want to physically take it off the platform and print them. And then you have also another one that I hadn't heard of called Maestro 3D Ortho Studio. It's a really clever software. When he was explaining it looks really useful. It's cool. You can stack a DICOM in it, which is really nice. With the roots segmented out so you can see how they move within the bone. You can make your own customized attachments, but the library looks pretty good, so I don't know why you want to do that. And then they'll give you a fairly good idea of what would be required in terms of number of trays. So even if you're just trying to do a clean check before a patient starts something like Invisalign and you don't want to put it through your clean check necessarily, something like that can be really helpful. And you can make suck down retainers. A lot of people will use CNC laser cutting machines, but they are expensive. Like he was saying, his laser cutter is like over $100,000, which is not cheap, but it also means that people don't have to cut them out themselves. The machine can do it. And then you just have to finish the edges and just smooth them up and polish them a little bit. I feel like with what we have access to within our practice, we don't have a laser cutter. I feel like it would be incredibly labor intensive to have us making our own aligners, 3D printing them, doing the suck downs. It doesn't make viable sense for us at the moment. I do see a lot of merit in it in terms of if you have relapse and you want to just correct with like a couple of aligners. I've done that before where I've taken ortho software and I've just like twisted and done a few like minor movements, but I'm not that comfortable within what I've experienced so far to do anything more comprehensive and complex. I'd rather use companies that have a lot of research and backing behind their materials and their algorithms and data of how the body reacts, because something like Invisalign, they've had, I think it's like 8 million cases, and they've been doing it for years and years and years. They've had a heap of different patents over time. It doesn't have to be Invisalign necessarily, but you get the idea where I think I like to know, I'm happy to use and pay the premium knowing that the patient is getting the best practice around it, because it does worry me a little bit, like pressures and forces in terms of burning roots out, shortening them, doing sort of that longer term damage if you're putting too much excessive force on teeth. I think like if you're an orthodontist and you have a deep understanding, if you have a really deep understanding of the forces and all of the back end of engineering behind it, then yeah, sure, I go for it. But I don't feel comfortable in that space. And that's the great thing about technologies. You can pick and choose how much you want to take that horse. Technology is the horse, and we as the rider can guide it to where we want it to be. He was also saying that PEGT blanks, which I've never used them, don't know what they are, they tend to be a bit more brittle when it comes to aligners. So bear that in mind. And then our last lecture was by a really, really nice guy called Hiro Ashi, and he lives in Japan, in Shiba, which is like very close to Tokyo. Cool guy, Japanese, but grew up in Colombia. And he was a notable Colombian house DJ. And then when he was like 25, he decided that the nightlife was not for him, which I can relate to because I was also a professional DJ for 5 years. He would want to go back to Japan because obviously it's part of my culture, it's part of me, but I've never been there, I've never lived there. And so he moved back and he became an English teacher, and then somehow he met somebody who was a CEO of an orthodontic company and then got involved with them, and then now is working with Heygir, which is a Chinese printer company that's really coming up in the world. Fascinating. I was talking to him about Japan, and a lot of people think Japan, like super, super advanced technologically. Let me insert one of their promotional clips. I was like, damn, this is insane shit. Like, Veritron. I didn't even know how to describe it. I was like, shit, I want to buy myself like 5 of these printers and put them in a room on a resin tank. There are a lot of different automated options out there, and some are designed to be more chairside in office style. Some of them are more big boys that are designed to be lab-based, that like you have to rip this hole off the roof and crane the thing in because it's so damn big. Some of these printers are designed to print like 400 to 500 models a day, which is wild. They also have cleaning machines where you can wash like printed dental models in the space of 60 minutes, or in like just a big deep frying bath. It's crazy. I really like his thought and approach around automation of technology, because I think a lot of people hear automation and they get very scared because they're like, we're firing people, like we're making ourselves redundant and useless. But he was talking about how we should really, as a profession, be thinking about it in terms of ethical automation and humane automation. He was saying that automation, yes, it reduces labor costs because you don't need to pay 3 people to be making these 500 models a day. Instead, the machine can do it, but you can still keep those 3 people as part of your business. You can then divert them in other areas that are value building and value adding. And probably, to be honest, into areas that are more meaningful in their work. 3D printing models it would get pretty mundane after a while. You're not firing people by using automated machines, or at least you shouldn't be, and that shouldn't be why you're buying them. You're making more people valuable within the workflow process. In this day and age with social media, there's a lot to be said about that, because I think there are a lot of people who don't feel a great deal of purpose in this world. And being able to create things is such a joy within work. And that's why I love dentistry. I really like that philosophy. And he was talking about a guy called Frank Pasquale, who's a professor of law at Cornell. And he has this book, and one of the quotes that Hiro took out of it was, "A humane agenda for an automated world prioritizes innovation that complements work in the jobs. A humane agenda for automation would prioritize innovations that complement people, the workers within their jobs that are or ought to be fulfilling other vocations. They're not meant to be cogs in a machine. Machines can do that now, which is cool." Yeah, so that was interesting. And then we had a really cool Q&A panel at the end. Talked a bit about metal printing. It's fucking expensive and complex. And there's literally one person in Australia who does it. Because essentially you buy the metal printer and it's like $100,000, but you have to have an entire room that's like very specifically controlled. So you're going to spend at least like another $200,000 to $300,000 fitting it out and setting it up. So for that reason, most people who have access to sort of metal milling and medical grade metal milling or metal printing are typically going to be large companies, because they are the ones who can take the gamble, so to speak, on that sort of technology when it is in its burgeoning era. If you are a smaller manufacturer, that is a shit ton of money, and if it doesn't turn out to be as good as you thought it would be, that could be the destruction of your whole business. Don't believe the manufacturers. do your homework, because manufacturers aren't your day-to-day users out in the wild, and it's never perfect. You can try and create day-to-day simulations in your tests, but it's not so. Take it with a grain of salt. Charlie Anderson, the guy from the 3D printing resin company, he was saying, like, I asked the question because they decided to single me out as the person who apparently had a question, and I was like, I definitely don't have one, but I guess I'm gonna have to make one up. So I asked, what's been the biggest fuck up that you've made, and what did you learn from it? And they all gave the classic, there's no such thing as a mistake. It's a lesson. And I'm like, okay, that's nice, but can you just spill the tea and tell me what you've actually done? Because I want to hear what goes wrong. Like, what is the reality? Ooh, spilling my champagne. I want to hear the nitty gritty of, like, I did this really dumb thing and I will never do it again. And you probably shouldn't do it either. So, like, be wary. I think it was Joan who was saying that he knows of somebody who hit print from the upstairs computer to the printer that was downstairs, didn't realize that there was an already printed job on the build platform. It wasn't a printer like an Asiga that had a sensor for pressure, so it moved down, it tried to print, and it pushed the existing model into the screen and cracked it and completely fucked the entire printer. So don't do that, because that wouldn't be a very good day. But Charlie was saying that even like a millimeter resin spicule in your resin can ruin your day. It can crack your screen, especially if the printer doesn't have one of those sensors. And it's expensive, and it's annoying, and it's a pain in the ass. Charlie's company has a really, really good tool that you can 3D print. I think it's on their website. I'm going to link it down below. If they don't have it publicly available, I'm sure he wouldn't mind if you reached out to him, because he seems like a really nice and helpful guy. And what else? Interesting about metal printing as well. When you print metal, you then have to put it in a really, really hot oven for 10 hours after. So it's like by no means a quicker pathway. 3D printing is insane when you think about the technology. People think, oh yeah, just printing some stuff. You are taking what is a solid object, you are making it into a liquid to then create a new solid object. That's pretty wild. The chemistry, the engineering, the amount of technology that goes into that it's wild. And I think sometimes simplicity of what we do is, you sometimes forget just how complex the background has been to make your life as simple as pressing that button. And Harry rounded the whole thing off by saying that you should change your thinking about 3D printing. I like that. And I think for a lot of people it's true. I like to think that we're pretty much 99% digital based. But the whole conference definitely did change my thinking about 3D printing, because to be honest, I went into it thinking, I print a lot. I know a lot of stuff about printing. That's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's where you're like, yeah, I know some stuff. I'm an expert. Then you get to the peak of competence, and then you dip down into this area that people like to call the Valley of Despair, where you realize, oh shit, I really don't know anywhere near as much as I thought I did. And then you spend a long time trying to work your way out of that valley, and you get there. You do. But I think it's a healthy space to be in. This is why it is always good to be the dumbest person in the room. I learned a lot, and I really appreciated the time. It was a really, really great event. Dent Events has a digital dental technology forum in May where they have 50 different speakers, and they have all of the different companies, all of the different reps, all in one place in Sydney. I went to it 2 years ago, and it's really good for networking. If you're thinking about getting into different areas or want a different product, and you can see them all in action, you can check them all out side by side. And it's the sort of day where, because there's so many speakers, you can very much pick and choose what you think will be relevant to you. I actually ran into my university lab technician who taught me how to make like acrylic dentures and stuff. and he has been doing it for ages. And I was talking to him about it, and he was thinking about getting into 3D printing. And I was just like, this is such a bizarre experience where he imparted so much knowledge to me in dental prosthetic manufacturing and design. Like, I remember the first time I waxed up a denture, I was like, damn, it did not look good. It looked like dog shit. Well, I know what I was thinking because I didn't know anything. But it was really interesting for me to then be able to have a conversation with him about 3D printing. And it's sort of like the two worlds combining of the new guard and the old guard. And I think there's a really healthy middle ground where we can all work together. And that was a really nice blast from the past. He still works with the uni, actually, which is cool. He would have been there for a while now, actually. So yeah, that is 3D printing and all of the things that I learned. Check out the description for all the tidbits, the good stuff. None of them are affiliate links. I am not paid by any of them to speak about them or spruik their stuff. No shameless plugs. Yeah, it was good stuff and I appreciated it. As they said in the Q&A panel, education is not cheap, but it's definitely something that pays dividends. So make of that what you will. And I will catch you soon.